Sean's on more gravity. Let's play chess. let's see. I'll review the second game for sure. And this first game looks like it had a brilliant move. Uh, when Black insisted on pursuing things with they pawn. Pawn takes e3. Sarah, so I'll say her. She played pawn takes e3. It's actually a brilliant move because it ignores the safety of the bishop at b4. I think it was so that was the main part of this game. It's just a great move there by my opponent. And I just lucked into something here with the knight drops on e5. It's not really much of a game to go over. This game, however, more moves, more accurate by both people at the black pieces. Let's take a look at this game in greater depth. We'll start off letting it just play in game review, and when it becomes time, I'll have stuff to comment on it. This is the Petrov defense, often called the Russian defense. They're allowed to be named that way. They're both the same. Okay, so after the queen trade, my idea is kind of a weird one, owing to the weirdness of b4 in part. My thoughts here: I'm going to trade these queens and then stash my knight here on a4. He'll be so safe there. This light squared bishop is worlds away from attacking the knight, and the queen's off while my knight's on a4. Knight to c3 is very tricky at any point in time for white, because I'll either just trade or even just capture the knight. It keeps white's knight in a bit. I can always cash out with knight takes c3. If black sees the idea, if white sees the idea and plays bishop to b2, then there's even the danger of knight takes b2. So I like this idea here that I found, and we'll see that it does affect the play for quite a while. So knight to a4, though it's on the rim and then scrim and all that, but this is the level of this idea is beyond that particular rhyme. And my opponent played pawn to d4. Try to open up a diagonal here for the bishop to play bishop to b5 check. And there's some sort of low level, or not low level, there's some less complicated tactics involved. And who wouldn't? I mean, I played bishop to d7 to block, of course, and then want to capture this knight that, frankly, I put there because he's now strong, and my opponent respects that with the move pawn to d4. We see that after d5, this is exactly what happens, and I'm able to defend from losing a piece with bishop to d7. c4 is just... it's not a really good move. It's not all that great move. We trade off these bishops, and I still have this knight that is so oddly powerful on a4. He's not even on an outpost, and he's demanding attention. And bishop takes b4 check to earn a pawn, so I'm up a pawn. Let's take a look at this from white's point of view. Here with white to move, he's in check, and he pinned the knight by moving knight to d2. My general advice, my friends, bishop to d2 here. If black wants to instigate a trade, then all bishop to b4 check has done is develop one of white's minor pieces. Says you can kind of stop your thinking there and say, yeah, that's actually a help for white. Oftentimes people will come in, and I guess I'm one of those people now, with bishop to b4 check, but in this case warranted and accurate to capture the pawn on b4. In many cases just sort of barreling forward without much thought about how exchanges would affect development, really, to affect black's piece development and white's piece development. So I had a good reason. Mine knock. Bishop takes b4, netted black a pawn, and so that's good enough reason. So keep it highlighted. Standard developing, sort of. Knight to d7. I was worried at this point about a future knight to e5, and yeah, I have that pawn to kick that knight. I didn't want it to get to that point, so I played knight to d7, eyeing and helping to control e5. Even if white has control overall, I can still kick the knight from being on a really strong outpost on e5. So that's all that's behind knight to d7 here. Castle's kingside, and yeah, black better get hop to it. Black better hop to it here. Castle's kingside as well. I'm not gonna dally with my king on the open file for my opponent's rooks to attack. I see here, many moves later, we see white still hasn't quite solved what's going on with this edge knight, the knight on the edge at a4, and now he's kind of working well in combination with the bishop. There's scary, really just scares with bishop to c3. White can always handle these with rook to b1, but it's not sure that this could be the start of a tactic, winning a pawn, winning a piece or something. But turns out I'm pretty sure white can handle any of these scares, anything relating to c3, really. Knight c3 or bishop c3, white has the pieces in the correct places to deal with it. I played rook at f to e8. You might think, well, how did you know not to play rook at a to e8? Well, first of all, it's closer towards the king's side of the board, but that's not important. As we'll see soon, that's not a big deal. Rook at f to e8 was mostly that my opponent has a dark squared bishop, and after rook at f to e8, I have two rooks on light squares. Whoops. All right. Instead of having the rook on e8 owning the file, but my rook on f8 kind of scrunched in, right? He can't move. There's no moves if I move rook a to e8. This rook has no moves, and that's just leaving yourself vulnerabilities that you won't have time to clean up later. So I played rook at f to e8. It's a better move, and I think my opponent got the better of me. No, not this. This is a good move, but not quite at it. I'll retreat my bishop, on d6. He's helping with eyeing my opponent's king, which that hasn't been the deal yet, or the idea yet for either side. It's more of a safe king game, and but also the e5 square, and if white wanted to make an intrusion on the c file, then also eyeing the c5 squares. A lot of black's pieces are working in harmony. Bishop to e3, super solid, right? Super solid, super safe. Develop a piece. I like it. It's just a straightforward, good move. But I mean that in a positive way. Now a6, we're starting to get back into this whole knight a4 conundrum. The idea is a6 forces the issue against white. B takes a6, rook takes a6, and black's looking a little bit even better than before. The knight is still weird and awesome and powerful. We've traded a pair of pawns, and here's this rook on a6, light square, so the bishop can't get at him, and is now contributing towards the safety of some of the minor pieces. And who knows, maybe he'll travel to b6 and attack the knight on b3 as part of a tactic himself, the rook himself. I like to think of rooks as usually dudes. I think I get that because sometimes, because I let the knights be sometimes dudes and sometimes females. Like Joan of Arc rode a horse and she was a woman, definitely a woman. So sometimes the knights are females. The rooks, for whatever reason, that they are men. The bishops are certainly men, and the kings are men. The queens are women. Pawns are mostly women. By the time when they get to the opposite side, it's almost always the pawn is almost always uh, promoted to a queen. So I consider these pawns. Actually, I misspoke there. Not as women, but girls. These these pawns here are girls, and they all have the potential of reaching all the way to the other side to become very powerful queens. Well, the rooks, they kind of look uh, like a pint almost. Like certain beer mugs, you might be ready to put a really heavy ale in it. It's got some alcohol in it, and you put it on the table safely but firmly. And that to me is more masculine in the grand scheme of things. So the rooks are more masculine by being beer mugs. And also historically, barracks were uh, almost always populated by men. And a rook is looking like a castle, and it's a lot like a barracks or a keep or a castle or something. So there we go. Now, knight to a5 is a kind of it's a bit of a strange move. It's a little sneaky move. White tries to catch black unaware and snatch a pawn on b7, and then if any trouble, liquidate with knight takes d6. I'll have to double these pawns, and all of a sudden, black's wonderful game has been disrupted quite strongly. So I really like this move that my opponent played, knight to a5. And yeah, it goes back to the right rook in the right spot. Rook to b8 is a strange move, putting the rooks right next to each other in the corner, all the way in the corner, and away from the castled king. You wouldn't know this is uncommon. Uh, this this is uncommon. So yeah, pawn takes a6, rook takes a6, and black continues to make steady, slow, constant progress. You see this graph here? It looks like the break came at about the blue move, wherever that was. So about move 10, which is uh, a little bit of an early break, but not all that early or late anyway. But look, then since then, what I've been able to chip away at the position until now, where black has has a point of material and a good deal of positional trumps and advantages. Knight to c3, knight to c5. Trading knights rather than bishops seemed good enough, and the computer agrees. And then bishop all the way back to f8. 6 years ago, that bishop would have been on e7. Not a bad placement. It's still, I could go to f6 and control these squares against any incursion from the knight, and maybe the knight will play knight to e2 check, and once the king moves, the bishop will have the rook on a1 for the exchange after rook takes a1. But I didn't like having the knight, so I didn't like having the bishop just sitting there on e7. It's a little bit more prone. He's prone to some attack. So I brought him all the way back to f8. Now my opponent covers c5's protection with this knight on d4, and what you got to think here as black, can he reach a discovered check? And if so, then you got to calculate all the way through this, that, or the other. But at this point, with the knight in the way along this diagonal, I see right away, no, this knight cannot reach a discovered check to be against my king. And in fact, he's not all that much of a threat overall. Maybe a little bit to the rook on b8. I hadn't quite gotten into that, but I think black is doing fine with the move. Bishop c5, trying to trade equal value pieces more than anything else, really. More in that particular move. Knight f5. Bishop takes e3, and the recapture. So this move has some downsides, but c6 overall, I thought it wise to have a really strong pawn chain. And on the downside, my rook at a6 is now, he doesn't have nearly as much say-so over the 6th rank. However, rook at b to a8 puts two rooks against the pawn on a3, and it could be exchanged or whatever. This rook is not sold out of the game quite yet. Plus, after c6, and I told you about this strong pawn chain, knight to e4 is very strong as well, to have an outpost on white's side of the board. a4, so I instigate the exchange of pieces. Now, black enjoys a bit of material advantage. I thought f6 was the most straightforward way to deal with the threat of knight takes f7 or rook takes f7. f6 is very difficult for white to solve in terms of contributing with his rook along the f file. And b5, I said, hey, we got connected past pawns, and even those two have a buddy. We've got the right kind of pieces nearby, the right kind of pieces that are going to be far away in the rook at b8. This sounds like this could be a successful march towards promotion. b5, g4, and it's just push. There goes b4, and after b3, if the rook wants to capture on c6, and he did, then b2, and the pawn's unstoppable with this neat portion of it that the pawn is controlling the c1 square. The rook can't get back to protect in time because the pawn is already in control of that square, and there's no way for white to stop the pawn from at least promoting with the pawn's gonna promote. I like this though. My opponent played knight to f5, not giving up and showing that maybe rook to c7 and then rook takes g7, and is there a perpetual there and all that kind of stuff. It's not, but it shows that my opponent is continuing to fight the good fight here. Queen to b1, b1 equals queen check. Is that what b1 equals queen check? The check helps out with the timing of things, and this is just standard. We're going to hunt white's king, trying to give priority to any moves that levy a check. And then after queen to e8 check, white is forced to move to h6, and queen to g6 is checkmate. Rather than finish the game out to checkmate, my opponent resigns when at this mate in 1. So overall, I thought it was a really cool game. I thought my opponent played well. I was glad that I played well, and I played very well in it. So, just by the feeling of the game, that some of the themes, I really like the story of the knight on A4 a lot, and then this king hunt at the end wasn't so bad either. And of course, also focusing on accuracy, that I played a very accurate game, uh, is important to me, in addition to all those other things. So, I think that's it for this broadcasting session. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons, and more gravity. Have a great night.